Thank you very much, Mr. Primakov. Happy to see you again. Happy to be here. And ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm very happy to be with you today, address these very complex and challenging issues of our time. And my thanks also goes to the government of Russia, in particular the Ministry of Defense, for organizing this security conference, but also by dedicating the time and the resources to look at a problem of our time. The number of refugees and displaced persons have reached unprecedented numbers. We are almost at 70 million refugees. And interesting enough, 40% of those people, of the displaced, internally displaced refugees, are in the Middle East. This region is only 6% of the total population of the world of 7 billion. We're about 350 to 400 million, but we have about 40% of the world displaced. That is telling something about the wars in the Middle East, in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, and in Yemen. And the displacement, if we look at Syria, which is the subject of our discussion today, or Iraq, we see that, for example, from Syria, we have 5.5 million people that are registered by UNHCR in the surrounding countries, in Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Egypt, and Turkey. There are inside Syria an estimated number of about 6 million that are considered to be displaced. That brings the number to about 11 to 12 million. That's one of the biggest numbers we have seen in our modern history since World War II. The return of such a big number of people, given all the obstacles and the challenges that we see, is going to be a massive undertaking. The country is in need of rehabilitation, of reconstruction, something my colleagues from ICRC mentioned. The challenges are huge. The world should dive into action to really try to alleviate the suffering and upgrade the situation in many of the corners of Syria, be it in the major areas of shelter, health, water, sanitation, education. This is a population that's known to value education. It's an element that's holding a lot of people back from going home. And there are many obstacles detaining people from going home. I mentioned some of these services, but also as far as property, documentation, conscriptions, amnesty, and these are issues that we're discussing with the Syrian government, but also with the help of the Russian government. And I think we made some progress on the property law with others. We work with UNDP, with the High Commission for Human Rights, with NRC, the Humanitarian Affairs Committee in Geneva, and of course the Russian government and some of our partners in New York as well. So hopefully creating conditions conducive for return means removing many of the obstacles. Some are material, construction, rehabilitation, services. Some are legal, the security conditions. I mentioned some of them: documentation, freedom of movement, and the right to return or not to return. It's also a right of the individual, and the list is long. To really talk about return, we started to take what we call intention surveys regularly among the 5.5 million refugees, and we found that 80% plus they tell us that they want to return home. They want to return home, but there are conditions for them to return home, some of which are these conditions that I just mentioned. They need education, they need health, they need services, they need their housings, they need physical security, legal security for them to go back. The number of those who are intending to go immediately is only about 12%. But when we look back a couple of years ago, this number is increasing. It's increasing as the situation inside improves. It did improve. It did improve because the guns went silent in many places, in many corners of Syria. There are some spots in northeast Syria, in Idlib area. There are very little skirmishes here and there. But this is a big difference, a big change from what we have seen since 2011. Of course, there's a huge destruction. And as I said, the challenges are huge. When it comes to return of refugees as compared to return of IDPs, we see big number of internally displaced persons returning. For example, in 2018, we saw about 1.4 to 1.5 million IDPs, internally displaced persons, returning to their home. This is compared to refugees. During the last 3 years, we saw about 165,000 returning. And that because there is a big difference between IDPs and refugees. Refugees are hundreds of kilometers away, cross borders. They have other requirements to satisfy. An IDP is a person who moved from one place to another. It could be 1 block, 2 block, or 5 blocks away, or a town or a province away. However, the refugees are beyond international borders. There are also vulnerabilities among these refugees. It deters them from going back. They do not have first-hand information to their areas of origin as the IDBs do. They cannot do a go and see visits as IDBs can, because that sometimes, as I said, can be just down the street. And therefore, and the requirement also for them to go back as far as their documentation, whether they have valid passport, they have IDs, whether they have the means to go back, all of these adds up to a manifestation that return of refugees usually in these circumstances take longer. Return will start, it started, but it will not be in big numbers until we overcome some of the basic fundamental obstacles. The massive destruction that you have seen in the video clips that was shown to us now by the Ministry of Defense, the fact that services are not there, livelihood, a lot of areas are contaminated by mines and unexploded ordnance. The big driver for many families, as I said, education, total destruction in many areas of schools, of supplies, non-existence of teachers in these catchment areas of children. These are all challenges that we have to overcome. There is another issue that, and we're calling on the international community to show discipline, that the whole issue of refugees return became politicized, highly politicized, and it divided really the world, east, west, center, if you like. And our call is to really depoliticize the issue of return. Return is a human right. People have to make a choice. Let them make that choice voluntarily based on the information that they have. And let's also support those who are returning with the necessary needs that we can address or cover. We have, as far as UNHCR and our partners, we have scaled up our presence in Syria. We have, aside from our offices in many places, in center, east, north, west, but also we open about 105, 106 what we call community centers, where people come for counseling on their legal status, on their documentation, on their property, on the whole issue of amnesty, the whole issue of conscription, and also the vulnerables come for psychosocial support together with some of the local and international actors that we have. And we have about 2,300 volunteers that are working throughout the country. They have been trained extensively. They all hold degrees, higher education, and they're trained. They're trained and they're capable. And we see a buy-in from the public, that they really rally around these community centers, and they make them a first point of show up, if you like. Some of them are all an all stop shop kind of location, because they also, and some instances, in some of them, we distribute relief items aside from what we provide as far as legal counseling and so on and so forth. The 9 years later, unfortunately, the condition of the refugees in the neighboring countries are not getting better. With all the billions that were raised, with the fact that the situation is stabilized, no more people are leaving, but for the simple reason that those who are outside, they're getting poorer and poorer. 70% to 80% of them are they're living below the poverty line and indebted. They've been borrowing money, and there are no enough livelihood opportunities. A lot of them working part-time jobs. A lot of them, they're getting paid less than the minimum wages or half of the minimum wages, sometimes meager pay. Some of the negative survival mechanism is to allow children to work, to support a bigger and a larger family. That means they're not going to school. Half of the children, the Syrian children, abroad as refugees or as IDBs, are not going to school for the reason I mentioned earlier. Because of destruction, because of no space, or even in the country of asylum, because there isn't enough resources to really put everybody in school, but also some families made very tough choices to pull their children out of school and have them work to support the bigger family. All of these are issues that really contribute negatively to the presence and the plight of refugees. The more they stay outside.
Mr. Awad, it's a very special pleasure of mine to remind my ex-boss about timing. I'm really sorry for that.
The time? Yeah, 1 minute. Okay. So the just to pay tribute to the plight of also the host communities and the host countries, and we call again for a burden sharing, responsibility sharing for supporting these countries, which opened their doors and accepted refugees, which is an international protection right for them, and also the communities who shared resources throughout the last 8 years with the refugees that lived among them in the bellies of towns and villages throughout the neighboring countries. Just in conclusion, I would say we'll have to work hard ultimately in finding solutions. We have to prepare the conditions for return inside. We have to find a coalition of a bigger number of organizations and donors to really work on finding a roadmap and perspective and a bigger picture for the return of refugees and IDPs back to their homes. Thank you.